for listening in to another episode of Conversations with Alison Jaye, The Journey to Here. Please remember to subscribe, hit the like button and share. Hello and welcome to Conversations with Alison Jaye, The Journey to Here. I'm your host, Alison Jaye. Today we're going to have with us, I call him King Cas. He is an author, a playwright, and he does a lot of work with the health and the social, emotional health of young Black boys, many who have gone through traumatic experience of being abused by family members, people close to them that they know. So today in Conversations with Alison Jaye, The Journey to Here, welcome King Cas.
I'm really good, thanks. And how are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Really good.
Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. I'm still floating from that conversation we had last week. I thoroughly enjoyed that.
Likewise. I feel like I've known you forever.
Yeah. I agree. I concur. I feel the same way.
When people, when the spirit just connects and takes with somebody, it's actually a really good thing, because there's enough times when, especially as people from either Africa or the Caribbean, it's like, my spirit don't take that one.
Yeah. Exactly. No, that's our compass. Literally, that is our compass.
Absolutely. And it's funny because it would take for me to be much older to realize that that's actually, it's not just a saying. It's actually real.
It's real life. It's real life. We've been having a series of conversations this afternoon, with some friends and so on, and all of that stuff has come into it. If something is not the vibe, it's not the vibe. It's not the vibe. I was explaining a situation that I was in for a time, and somebody asked me, if I missed it, because it came with lots of like bells and whistles and stuff like that, and I was like, no. And they were like, I would. And I said, yeah, but you don't know what price I had to pay for those bells and whistles.
That part right there.
And the price was peace at the time.
Yeah.
And I will never overextend my peace like that ever again. And I can't even blame the people who did the hurtful things, because I gave them allowance.
So it's funny you should say that, because two things you're saying there. It takes for you to experience things and possibly get older, because sometimes you can experience a lot when you're young. So it's not necessarily even age, because you've got some older people that are still like wilding out, like they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So, but it takes for you to have to go through something to realize that, something, my peace, my absolute peace is more important than, like you said, all the bells and whistles. Because what's the point of the bells and whistles and you can't sleep at night?
It's pointless. Like, take it from me, I've lived in a very, 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 very comfortable, lavish place and not slept a wink, because you have to really enter this thing intentionally, and you have to have your mind in the right place. You if you get the chance to make your mistakes in private, do that.
No, for real.
Do you know what I mean? Because you will get dragged for filth. If you don't handle your business properly. And so I think it's when you come out into the world, especially when you're a voice for people or whatever, you have to make sure that you really lived as much as you can and understand yourself, your behaviors, your trigger points, your habits, and all those types of things, because then you can navigate more authentically.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? And I think it's really important to talk about navigating things authentically, be able to navigate things intentionally, because when you realize that, like 5 years have gone by and all this has happened, it really puts things into perspective.
Yeah.
And you think about who you were in that time. For me, I've started to think about things like, wow, like emotionally 5 years ago I was like this, and it led me to the point where I say, okay, cool, I've got to work on fortitude. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because I still want to be able to feel my feelings
Yeah.
but but I want to be strong enough to make sound decisions, and not based on those feelings, but because I know what the right thing to do is, you know. So that whole thing of like, take a moment, count to 10, it's real, it, yeah, it's super real. And for me, I found that I've been able to really be at peace
Yeah.
because of being intentional, and because of being so keen to understand what's going on inside of my own brain and why I do things. Sometimes, it kind of leads me to being a bit of a workaholic, and I just can't stop. And it's like, stop. Today I decided to sort of take a moment. And this is the only thing, no, this is one of two things I'm doing today. And I had to allow myself that. And I had to be intentional with that too, because otherwise, before you know it, the week is done. And yeah, you've ticked boxes, but did you laugh? Did you
Yeah.
did you just have a deep conversation? I met this young lady when I came here today, where I am now, and like we just clicked and we just had the most amazing conversation, and it doesn't even feel like we're 9 years apart in age. It just felt like just a really good, positive conversation and whatever. She's gone home. I don't know her from anywhere. I just literally met her when I came to where I am now, and that was amazing. And if I didn't choose to do what I've done with my day, I wouldn't have had that little bit of enrichment, so yeah.
Just operate intentionally. And it's something interesting that you said. It's just that when we were talking about having peace, and there's something that you said, and what came to mind when you said that, and and it's funny because this came from a conversation I was having yesterday. And this is something we've all heard many, many times, but how many times we apply it and pay attention to it? You teach people how to treat you.
Yeah.
And maybe not necessarily so much as a child, because obviously the topics we're going to get on to talking about in a minute. But as you become older and you're more aware of who you are, you should actually be able to stop and say, you know something, I will not tolerate this behavior. I will not allow you. But so many times to almost, and it's funny, listen to this, to almost keep the peace when there's no inner peace, but to keep the peace, we go along with certain behaviors and certain attitudes when really inside you're screaming because that's not what you want. And it's so bizarre that now that we think about all the things that we kind of grew up believing and hearing, this, just do it to keep the peace. But what about my peace?
What about my peace?
Right? What about my peace? And I'm not talking about from a selfish aspect. It must just be all about me, even though it would be great if the world could operate that way. But I'm saying, but just genuinely, because from your inner peace, from your peace, that to me drives your mental state.
100%. 100%.
So, it's funny that you should say that. And just the more I've been thinking about it, it's just like, something. And I think for a lot of people, a lot of us, there's going to have to be some difficult conversations we have, but be it at home, be it at work, be it at church, be it wherever.
I've been on this mission for the last couple of years. And, a lot of the work that I do is fueled by this. For me, as a young man, coming into my own is very much to do with knowing where I've come from, and not just knowing where I come from heritage-wise or geographically, but also on a spiritual level, on a mental level, on an emotional level. What are the patterns and things like that? And so I began asking those really difficult questions, and it really ruffled some feathers. And for a time, for a time, I was a non-starter because of it. I was a non, don't involve him, don't let him hear that, because those difficult questions that the older generation did not want to answer, I was asking those questions. And the thing is, I'll do it in in a really belligerent way, because I was like, you lot have done such a good job, like keeping certain things. And I'm not just going to lift the cover on it, I'm going to set a bomb. And I'm going to make sure that it is visible from space so that every child in this family knows that if you're wondering something, ask and do not be fearful. And when you're discovering those things, and when you're finding out those things, take it as an education and let that inform your decisions going forward. In the Bible, it says we perish for lack of knowledge.
Right.
Okay? How can I come into my own if I don't know my own? Like it doesn't make any sense. So I was the one who was out there asking the different questions. There are people who are like, you know, in their mid 40s, touching 50s and stuff like that in my family, who are like cousins or whatever, you know, and God bless them. I can see that they're still battling with what happened 20 years ago and what happened 25 years ago, you know, and it's really, really sitting heavy because they were oppressed. Let's be honest. They didn't feel like they could stand up. They didn't feel like they could have those authentic conversations. They didn't feel like they could have those difficult conversations, which is the thing. I was like, yeah, I'm not going down quietly. I'm not that one. I'm just not the one. And I was a non-starter because of it. But I've made peace with the same people who were ruffled. You know, we've made peace, and it's good because they know where I stand now. So there's a mutual respect, and it's not just default because you're older or because you're my uncle, because you're my auntie. It's now mutual because I've shown you that I stand for something. You know, and that something is who I am. Do you know what I mean? You know, and after you do the work that I do, and people throw their bullets and their daggers and all that kind of stuff, you know, it chucks you about a little bit. You know, so you develop some thick skin, and by God, you better charge valiantly. You know, when you go there, you know, you better move, and you move properly, because, you know, they're gonna remember. And don't let them remember because you were just a little bit of an annoyance. Let them remember because you were an annoyance, but you made a difference. It actually counted for something.
And that's actually what I wanted to ask you when you said that the people whose feathers you ruffled, you and them have now made peace. And
yes.
And there's people now that's uncovering their own truth, uncovering their own experiences, having their healing. Do you think for some of those people, whether or not they came forward and told you what their experience was, do you think for some of those people, you actually freed them?
I think so. But what it is that freedom doesn't look like freedom if you've never had it. So if I can say to you, guys, like, the other side of this fence is amazing. Like, I'm letting you know, you can really do your thing. You can legit do your thing, you know, and all they know is the bondage of secrecy, and the bondage of ignorance, and the bondage of, you know, pretending like they didn't see that, or they're pretending like that thing is okay. And I remember I confronted some relatives last year, got into a mad argument. Like, it was big, right? It was in the garden. I remember my older cousin, he was just there barbecuing me, and he's a big brother to me, and he absolutely can pull me up and say, too much. He absolutely can. And, you know, he's one of the most rational people I know. And, you know, he stayed silent the whole time when I presented my argument, because he understood the importance.
Did you say he stayed silent? The connection breaking up a little bit.
Oh yeah. No, he stayed silent while I was doing my talking, and I was revealing things, and I was telling these relatives what I know that they've not really spoken about in the past. He stayed quiet. He's the type of person who would pull me up in a second and say, "You've gone too far," right? And he's my big bro, like, so I would respect that. He stayed silent the whole time. It's only when I got a bit rowdy at the end, right? That's when he was like, okay, cool. He was like, that's enough.
But before we go any further, Cas, I would like you, please introduce yourself and what you do. Okay.
Brilliant. So my name is King Cas Ajani. Most people call me King Cas. Friends call me Cas. And I am a creative entrepreneur. I feel like that's the best way to describe what I do. I sing, I write songs. I've written books. Currently, only one is published. I'm about to publish a new book at the end of the year. And I'm also now a playwright, and I do digital media production. So that's my day-to-day sort of like, you know, engines turning kind of work. And then the real heart of who I am is that I'm a youth mentor. I work specifically with young teenage Black boys, and we work on emotional development, emotional well-being, teaching them how to identify and address emotion, and applying that to real life situations, giving them a floor and a space to speak openly about their experiences, about their lives. And in fact, my forthcoming book, Stories Boys Don't Like to Tell, is purely about the stories that boys don't like to tell, where we touch on some very, very moving issues, things that you definitely do not hear in a discussion over the dinner table. And what I've done is I've brought the heart of my work to the heart of my work. All the creative stuff. Before, when I was writing songs and writing R&B songs, you name it, whatever. But then over the last few years, I've turned my talents to write on the issues that I speak to. Which is again the emotional development and well-being of young teenagers, and just giving them a space to be. And I call that my life's work, because I've been doing it for 13 years now, and the way it has grown me, and also to see that I've helped to raise 2 generations now of successful young Black men who are able to fend for themselves legally, who are able to give rest to their families, who are able to live their dreams, and they're doing it with the presence of emotional intelligence, and they're not suffering the same illnesses that so many of these boys out there are suffering, which is, the illness of silence. And many of these boys have been forced into silence, because their masculinity gets put on the table, and that's a very sensitive subject. How dare you put my masculinity on the table?
Wow.
At your will. How dare you? So the best thing to do is to stay silent.
And I want to ask,
But
because you're still fairly young yourself.
Yes.
You're still in your, if you don't mind me putting you out there, you're still in your 30s, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So, and you said that you've been doing this for 13 years. So what is your journey behind why you even got to this? Because for somebody so young to recognize what's going on and to move into this field of emotional development in boys, what's your journey and how did you get started?
So, when I was a small kid, I'm talking about 7 years old. No, let's go back to 6. Being 6 was like the best. And actually, this is the first time I'm going to talk about this like this. I've never said this to anybody. Being 6 was the best. When I think of childhood and I think about bliss and I think about happiness, I think about being 6. I remember on my 6th birthday, my mom came to pick me up from school, and she took me to Wimpy, in Avondale in Harare, and I had a Wimpy birthday party, burgers and chips and whatever, and my cousins were there. It was just lit, like it was amazing.
Sorry, Cas,
The
reception where you are is very spotty.
Oh gosh, what's happening here?
Yeah.
Is that any better?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, and no, it's no problem. So I just remember it was so happy. It was so wonderful. But at 6 years old, you're not really present to all that is really happening around you. You don't know people's true intentions.
Cas, I'm losing you because it's very
is that has been. I don't know why it's doing that. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so when you're 6 years old, you don't really know what's going on around you or whatever. And I was born into a family that was like, well off, and life was nice for us. You know what I mean? We had horses, like that type of life.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember when I was 6 years old. I remember it's the first time I got visited by God. This is why, like, no matter what I read or hear or whatever, I can't deny God, because like I've met the guy. So like, and it was unprovoked. Do you know what I mean? So it's like I may not know my Bible back and forth, but believe me, we've met, and I can't deny it.
Yeah.
And that visitation when I was 6 years old, he said to me, there are places you can't go, and there are things you can't do because of who you are. And that's the only clue I got. And I really imagined myself living this really idealistic lifestyle. I was going to grow up in the suburbs of Zimbabwe, and then of Harare in Zimbabwe. And then I was going to I knew what secondary school I was going to go to. I knew what college I was going to go to. I knew what university I was going to go to. I knew what job I wanted to do. I knew how many kids I wanted and by when, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I knew all of that stuff, right? But then when I look back on that vision, it helps me to understand who I am now and why I am who I am. Because if things went accordingly, and if things were as hunky-dory and perfect as they seemed, then actually not only would I have not been that nice of a person, let's be honest, I don't think I'd be that nice of a person, because life would not have taught me any real stuff.
Yeah.
Like right. So I think I'll probably be a very entitled individual. I would have had everything that I wanted by the time I wanted it, but it would have been quite fruitless, because I would just be another person existing in the system and not really making any real change. Not making any real change. So it's what happened after the age of 6. So at 6 years old, it's blissful, it's fun, it's brilliant, super spiritual, amazing. 7 years old, the morning of my 7th birthday, my dog died, and I was like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt very strongly at the time. I felt very strongly at the time that it was the beginning of the decline of the fairy tale that was. Because that's when family stuff started happening. People's characters started being revealed. People's intentions became clearer. Things erupted in front of me that as a child, it's like that harsh shaking, being woken up that like, this is not a dream. Like this is life. And then age 8 was the year when I was introduced to sexual contact, and obviously it was very inappropriate, and it was done by a couple of relatives, not just one. Just these weird things that at the time you can't process or whatever. And then there comes the whole moving to another country, and then there's the culture shock, and then there's the bullying. I came from Zimbabwe when being African was not cool. I came from Africa at a time where we were known for smelly food and living in huts, right? People spoke so ill of Africans, of Africa, of Africanness. So then now also there's identity issues. So there's family stuff, there's personal trauma, and then there's social trauma, and then there's identity politics at play everywhere you go. And then on top of that, there's racism, just to cap that for you. So I experienced a lot of pain to the point where I just wanted life to fast forward. I was so done. I was like, I can't wait till I'm older so that I can do something about this mess. I want to do something. I want to be able to exercise my own ideas. And even though we had grown up, well off in Zimbabwe and whatever, I never, ever, ever, ever set my eyes on my inheritance as a goal. Like for me, it's like, okay, cool, inheritance, that's great. But I always knew that I wanted to do something. And as I grew up and I started to experience behaviors in people that I recognized because I had done it, I was able to pick up on pain. And then I started to realize, okay, cool. So first things first, let's work on forgiveness, right? And so at about 19, 20, I went on like a big forgiveness journey. And the first and most difficult person to forgive was myself, because I was so used to being, attacked and badgered and all this kind of stuff. So I began to probably, what's the best word, to even be disparaging about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was easy to do that because everything was put on the table, right? I was this very loud, expressive, flamboyant child. So on top of being abused, which people didn't know at the time, right? People are now putting
this abuse, is this what happened to when you were saying about when you were 8 years old by two different family members? So because you referred to it as inappropriate sexual contact, but the reality is you were actually abused.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so, yeah, I'm gonna get to the good bit soon. So because of all of that,
Mm-hmm.
I was, and I saw how I behaved and things like that. Like I was able to, self-analyze, and I was like, okay, cool. I can see pain in these other people. I can see what's happening. But then it's like, before I could really help anybody, I had to like forgive myself for a lot of stuff, because I blamed myself for a lot of things that are just really not my fault.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to work towards becoming okay with that as well. And then I don't know. Once I kind of went through that process, suddenly my eyes could see what other people couldn't see. I could meet a young man on the street, and this has happened. This has happened. That same voice that spoke to me when I was sick is the same voice that made me take out my earphones when I was walking through Peckham. I heard someone call my name. I went to go and say hello. There was a young man standing next to him. He was 16 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Standing next to him, and he looked like he was nervous for whatever reason. I spoke to this guy. I knew him from McDonald's because he used to work in the McDonald's near where I used to work at the time. So I was like, yeah, what's good? Little did I know that these lot are in the middle of some street beef, like, and this kid was pretty much in the middle of being kidnapped. And I didn't realize this, right? But he gets introduced to me, right? Just as we're parting ways. And then the guy who used to work at McDonald's says, oh, this kid sings. I said, oh, really? Okay, cool. I'd love to hear your work. He gave me the link to his MySpace. And I followed it, and I listened to the music. And it was dreadful. It was absolutely dreadful. But I called him and I said, look, I don't know what this is, but there's something here. I don't know what. And if I tell you 12 years on, 12 years on, this young man, he is a phenomenal performer, phenomenal songwriter, phenomenal producer, phenomenal sound engineer. He's sought after. This is somebody who, that same voice said to me, that one. And as I was growing, I wasn't always like emotionally mature. Like when he would cross me, we would fight. We would argue. And he was 16, I was 20. So, in that little gap, it feels like a long time. It's really not, but it feels like such a long time. And I'm like, you have no idea what I've got on you in years, da 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 da. And there was a lot of like learning that I had to do, learning how to empathize. Thank God he's tough because I really gave it to him. And there were a few others who, were in the earlier days, I was a hurricane.
So when you say that the voice said that one, what about that one? Is it that you were able to pick up on that he was hiding something? There was a pain there that he wasn't speaking. What exactly was it?
It's the same thing that I see every time I see something. Like it's a thing. It's hard to describe, but usually it's channeled through a talent. And I can yes, and I can spot that talent even if it's mounded with cow dung. I can see it, and I have met people in an utter state, right? Mm-hmm. And what we do is we go through the journey and we do the unpacking. In fact, to begin with, we don't even look at the creative aspect of things, but for me to become that, I had to go through all of those realizations with the younger lot. Well, they're older now, you know what I mean? They're now like 28, 29 years old, and things like that. So, and this is when they were teenagers, like 14, 15, 16 years old when I would have met them. What then made me want to do this like work as like my life's work was because I reached the point where I was finally comfortable to talk about my traumas.
Mm-hmm.
There was the obvious ones, like, the whole mom and dad thing, because that didn't work out. So there was that obvious one, but then there was the stuff that people didn't know about, like being abused and stuff like that. So when I began to unpack that, and I started to feel like, okay, like I get what my purpose is now. Like I know why I had that pain, and I also now know why I recognize that pain, and I recognize when someone has something and they have a talent of some kind. Like my job is to help them to identify those tools and then channel it, and to channel it authentically. So one of the things that I used to get into fights with my kids about, like back in the day, we used to fight because I was like, bruv, your content is garbage. Why are you making this? Like your fans are 14-year-old girls. Like, yeah, it was what they want to hear, innit? I said, no, you have to understand, like, you have a voice that people actually listen to, and it's a powerful voice. I need you to fall in line. We used to get into fights about that all the time. Now I've learned how to navigate that whole thing a lot better, presenting alternatives and blah, blah, blah. It's just a bit of psychology, this. But, eventually, like, I was like, okay, cool. I have to do something about this, because there's no way that I've been through this, that I can see this, and I feel the way I do and not do something about it. And the biggest mountain to climb was, because my masculinity was dashed on the table when I was still just a kid. That was a massive insecurity with me. And the moment I was able to tackle that, one day I looked around, I looked at my friends, and I looked at who people, really deem to be manly and masculine. And I looked around and I was like, no, but these guys, some of them, they're BS human beings. Let's be honest. Like, I looked around and I was like, no, like some of these guys are BS human beings. Like, not to judge, but I'm going to judge for a second. I don't do that. Wait, hold on. How are you just skating by in life, getting away with that? Like, how? These times I'm out here beating myself up and all this kind of stuff. And I realized, no, like, I'm the kind of person who commits. And when I commit, I stay true. And when I do things, it's from the heart and it's not performative. I don't need adulation every time I do something wonderful for somebody. Like, I'm actually just living my life. So actually, do you know what? Like, I have the right to have the view that I have, and I'm going to stop beating myself up, and I'm going to respect that my masculinity doesn't necessarily reflect in the same way that another man does, right? Or a typical man, but my masculinity is in my actions.
Right.
It's not in the statements that I make. It's actually my actions. If you watch the way that I live, and that's the part that really got me. I said, okay, cool. Once I overcame that whole masculinity hurdle, it was like, this is my life's work. I have to do it, and ever since drop, because it was big enough to potentially cancel the work I do now. I could have just stuck to the superficial, being an R&B singer or whatever. The dream before that was even more selfish. I wanted to be a pilot, and I was happy to just do that and have my 3 kids and a wife and a drive a nice car and live in Zimbabwe for my whole life. I was not really going to affect anybody doing that. Do you know what I mean? So I think to myself, like, I didn't come this far to come this far. Like, I actually have to commit to this thing, and my commitment is real. And when I can tell you that I started this thing 13 years ago, and there is bankable evidence that I've been doing this, it makes me feel good. It makes me like, it's like, okay, I'm definitely on the right path and I'm doing the right thing. But the journey to get here was unpleasant. That's why
It's this thing. What is this thing?
The work that I do?
Yes.
Yeah. So the emotional empowerment, the mentoring.
Okay.
Looking after these young guys. And the thing is, it feels good to know that they can actually pick up the phone and not front and just say, I'd like to tell you how I'm feeling. It might sound really trivial to some people, but do you know that's a foreign language to some boys?
To be honest with you, I wouldn't even say to some boys, because if you look at how, especially if we look in the Black community, and in fact, not just the Black community, if we look in the Indian communities, Asian communities, I think you know what, blanket statement, I think if you just look at how men and boys traditionally are, it's like, you hear the, come on, boys don't cry, man up, and so on. So I think for any man to be able to pick up the phone and say, listen, today I'm feeling like this. Bro, I don't even need you to say anything. I just need to get this off my chest. I just need to pour this out. I just need to get it out. Yeah. And I just think for just any man, that is a necessity.
It's huge. It's huge. I'll tell you this, and the work for me has spread. You know, when I tell you that I was so insecure, and at the time I didn't even know I was insecure about this, but looking back, clearly I was so insecure in my masculinity, that I didn't think that a group of men, for any reason whatsoever, would ever listen to anything I have to say. Because my experience in school and growing up, I was always bottom barrel. Whether it was sports, whether it was even dating girls, like all that stuff, I was always like last pick, bottom barrel. Do you know what I mean? Like, and at the time it felt horrible. And it made me very, very insecure. But then I realized something. There's this thing, that I coined a phrase, right? Where I call it divine preservation. And if my shine was back then what I wanted it to be, God could not have worked on me. It's like I had to go through a maturation period, right, so that I'm able, because what's on me now, you can't give it to an inexperienced person. You can't give it to someone who doesn't understand how delicate some of these matters are. And let me be the first to admit, there have been times in the past when young people have confided in me about something and I mistreated the information by accident. There was a time when this young man, God bless him, he was going through his own battles and all this kind of stuff. And I thought I was being helpful when I told his best friend, I said, oh, by the way, so-and-so is going through a really hard time right now. And so, and really doesn't feel like you're going to understand, just, love on them. Do you know what I mean? Like all this kind of stuff. So the intentions were good, but I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have. And to this day, he told me, he goes, you know what? I didn't like that you did that. He goes, because I respect you so much. That's the only reason why we're not beefing. But but I could feel that he was definitely disappointed and he was let down. And I learned from that day, I said, I can't do that. I can't do that again. But that was part of the journey to becoming this person who people literally deposit their stories and allow me to share them with the whole world. And most of these boys, all but one, have all put their names on the stories that they've told me. They've all put their names on it. We're talking about porn addiction. We're talking about dealing with broken families. We're talking about being raped. We're talking about people who've been abandoned. We're talking about people who had to do multiple identities because at home and church he's one person and then at school he's another person. All these things. There's a guy who shared, Sabin Muhammad, God bless him. He shared a story about growing up being deaf, and because he was deaf, he was taken advantage of. He was sexualized as a child. People molested him and all this kind of stuff, women and men, and they've come and deposited these stories. Obviously, I can talk about it now because it's been submitted for the book, like it's out there, but I had to learn how to handle the mantle. I had to learn this thing, and it started off from me screaming at the top of my lungs at these boys because they weren't doing things in a way that I understood. And I have to admit, like, I'm African like that, like I've had to unlearn. No, I've had to unlearn the whole pop-off syndrome, because I would pop off like 0 to 100 and nothing, So it was weird because it was a journey of discovering myself, and then a journey of like saying things out loud, things that felt awkward, things that I was insecure about, to actually confess that I'm insecure in this area. Like, to say it felt like daggers. It was horrible. But being able to do that has made addressing my stuff so much easier. And I've learned how to facilitate a space for other people to be able to do the same thing. And like I was saying to you, the work has spread because, not only did I think that I wasn't man enough for this job, that's the bottom line.
And I want to touch on that. Because you have mentioned about being insecure in your masculinity.
Yes.
What does that even look like?
So because I didn't resemble the image of, like, that machismo, or, I wasn't the smoothest, or, I wasn't the fittest, I wasn't status quo, sort of like, the crush of all the girls. I wasn't that. And then on top of that, unbeknownst to these people, but some of these people would say things about my sexuality, about my masculinity, but I was a child. I didn't know what these things actually meant. So when I grew up and got to understand what these things meant, I was like, oh. So that was like a blow, because it was like, I'm not a man. You don't think
Wow. So what were some of the things that were said? Like, if you can share them, what?
yeah. Just little things like, oh, you sound like a girl, or like, the way you walk like a girl, or I'll never forget, one cousin said to me, like, oh, you talk like a puff, uh, yeah, and you know how archaic that word is. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
things like that, and they played, yeah. So that played on my mind. Because and so then, even with dealing with girls, like, I genuinely didn't believe that girls like me, like none of that stuff. I just didn't feel like I was man enough for anything, let alone be somebody who leads the charge on some of the most difficult discussions that men have ever had, and to do so successfully. It blows my mind, because I can't believe what my life has become. It's wild to me. It's wild.
And how did you get past that, and are you even past that journey, that point where people questioned your masculinity and you stood in your truth? What did that journey look like? What does that look like for you?
Well, right now is good. I mean, right now I'm who I am, and I'm effective. Yeah, that's what matters. Like, and just simplifying life, I think, has made it easier. But no, right now, yeah, like, if someone is of the opinion, either way,
That's
it's it's it's, it's that's their business. Like, I don't care, because when there's not one work that I do in life. There's not one element of my work that is me centered.
Mm. No, because
There's not one.
the reason that I ask is, like, if you've got a young person and they're in a
Yeah.
similar position to you, where they are they're hearing things, negative things about what other people think of their sexuality, and they're battling with it. That journey for you, where it no longer became a battle, what was that work that you had to do within yourself?
First of all, I had to say out loud that some of the things that happened as a child,
Okay.
and it feels like a lie when you say it for the first time, because to put that on another person is very serious. And even hearing it being talked about by other people, you almost feel like you're violating the other person as well, even though they violated you.
Mm.
So that was step one. And then I just had to be okay with using those experiences to encourage others to address theirs.
Mm.
I had to become okay with it. And one of the things that made me not want to speak is, again, the fragile masculinity. Like, it's like, if I say this, then people are gonna be like, I knew it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And there's that whole, I don't want them to be right feeling that comes with it as well. I don't want them to be right. Yeah, exactly. And so that's horrible. That's horrendous. And then I started thinking about the people who were in my life, and I started thinking about how, some of these people actually do right for me. And I'm myself around them. I don't pretend to be in any other kind of way or whatever. Like, I was like, these people are actually right for me. And so I allowed myself to soften up towards myself, and to just be, regardless. And there's nothing worse than, like, reading horrible things about yourself, like on the internet. Yeah, it's really horrible. But like with the way that I've had to kind of understand why I'm doing this,
Mm-hmm.
and to really invest all of my energy into that, it takes away the meaning of any sort of disparaging energies or bad comments or whatever. Like it's allowed me to be more comfortable. So addressing it head on, being able to talk about it, and understanding that actually the outcome is not really for me. You know, the outcome is going to be for someone else who's struggling and battling, and it would be mighty selfish of me and also corrosive to my spirit if I kept it quiet.
Got you. So you mentioned your book. Was it Stories Boys Don't Like to Tell?
That's correct. Yes.
Tell us what that is. Now, most people, we could probably hear that title and they could think they know what it's to do with, but what is that? What is this book to do with?
With the moment when the mosque was created, the moment in these young boys' lives when they decided that, oh, so this is the role I have to fulfill, as opposed to them actually just being themselves. And some of those stories could be being rejected by a girl in school. And it doesn't sound like a big deal to some people, but it's shaped a lot of people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
That moment has shaped people's lives. It could be a young man who reveals that, excuse me, he finds it difficult to address his traumas to his parents because he's a Black Jamaican boy. We don't talk about feelings like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, his dad is hardback. Yeah,
Yes.
he's not having it.
Mm.
He's not having it. And then on top of that, to then reveal that one of your relatives, one of your nephews,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
intruded upon my body. And as you know, in Jamaica, what's that saying? Bate man fi dead.
Right. Yeah.
And so now the boy's now questioning. And he can't talk to anybody. So he starts to have depression. He starts to have these moments where he's just filled with rage.
Mm-hmm.
He comes to see me one day. I open the door and he cruises past me. I said, "Are you okay?" He said, "No, I'm not." Started hitting himself in the face. I hate feeling like this. I hate feeling like this. I hate this. Breaks down, starts crying. That's what some of the stories look like. You know, it could be something that some people might deem trivial. You know, like, again, like I said, being rejected by a school crush or whatever. And some of it is as deep as that story, you know, and that story then meant going on a journey with him
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that he's not only is he okay talking it out, because I've seen through my experience that it's best to talk this stuff out. And the longer you leave it, that pressure cooker thing, it's real, you know, it's real. So let's talk about it, and let's talk about it often.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it often. Let it become normal language to you that, yes, this is what happened and I overcame, as opposed to this is what happened and I'm going to pretend like nothing happened at all, because that's dangerous. And he was able to, after the work we did, not only did he contribute a fantastic story to the book, but he was able to conjure up the courage to tell his mum what happened to him. And for me, that's the goal. Like, it's no good me knowing it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, beyond sort of helping them to facilitate their emotions and how, you know, to sort of process this thing. Beyond that, it's no good just me knowing. So I always encourage them. Yeah, I always encourage them to bring in family members like mom or dad or somebody. You've got to bring somebody in. And I also encourage them, if they are in touch with some of these abusers of theirs or whatever it is, I encourage them to confront them. And you say it with your chest. You know that time when you touched me? You know that sleepover, that time? Yeah, that day. Yeah. That time. Yeah, it's messed with me. just so you know. I just want you to know that it's messing with me. And I have been up for nights hating myself for something you did to me. And they can come around to that point. And to me, it's like, that's freedom. They can go and be free. And that channel of creativity, that thing that I saw, it can run unblocked. And it's on them because they did it. They did the work. And sometimes,
That's right.
I was going to say, yes, you know, most times it works great. And then other times, not so much. You know, like the saying goes, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And yeah, some of these horses are dying first.
Imagine, right? No, but one of the things I wanted to touch on when you were saying like if there's still nowhere to find the abuser, go and confront the person. But my question to you is, could there be a danger in that? And I'm going to share with you an experience as to why I asked that question. Could there not be a danger in that person going to the abuser and confronting them, regardless of how old that person now is?
Yeah, I think they can be, but I think also it's for a case by case basis. Like, you have to look at that sort of thing anyway. You have to look at, like, you know, is it safe to do?
Right.
You know what I mean? You know, who is the person? What is or was the relation? How age? You know, all those things can be taken into consideration. If the person is like not a safe person, do you know what I mean? Like, then you have to kind of heal by yourself, you know. But then where it's possible, and I do encourage this, where it's possible to have the discussion with somebody, the person who did it, because you never know as well. You might even be freeing them. That's the thing, because you know, usually abusers abuse people, right? So you never know. You might actually be able to say, you might actually be freeing them up a little bit. So it's a case by case thing. Yes, there can be some dangers. I wouldn't know what they are because we thankfully haven't put our foot wrong in that area. I haven't put my foot wrong in that area. But there is some kind of risk assessment that you've got to do, especially as you're getting to know the person who you're helping as well. You know, like, you know, because one of the biggest things that they don't want to do is that they don't want to cause unrest in their families through these stories and through, you know, bringing this. Yeah, they don't want to. That's one of the main things. It's not even so much about how they feel about themselves. It's about they don't want to cause unrest in the family. And they take that into consideration. So I also take that into consideration. And then sometimes I'm like, listen, if we need to kick doo-doo, we need to kick doo-doo. Because at the end of the day, the very silence that you're trying to protect is the silence that broke you in the first place. So break the cycle.
Yeah, because the reason that I asked that, I know of an experience that a person was abused by a family member, and they had suppressed it for many, many, many years. And it's not even so much they suppressed it. I think they were so young, they didn't know what to do with that. So it manifested itself in their behavior in other ways. And then fast forward several years, and this person's now into adulthood and goes back into that home for the first time in many, many years. Starts to have like flashbacks, and then confronted the abuser. What the abuser then did is completely manipulated the person. And when I told you, drove them out of their mind to the point where the person had to be sectioned. There was nothing wrong with the person. Nothing wrong with the person. They were not exhibiting any kind of mental illnesses, anything like that before. But it wasn't until they went back into that environment, because they were visiting, they went back into that environment and thinking, hold on, something took place here.
Yeah.
And they're like, and then it all started to come flooding back. And they went to the abuser, and the abuser was like, yeah, I did it. And what? And guess what else I did? And I did this, and I did this, and I did this, and I did it to this one, and this one, and this one. And started to threaten their safety, and then threaten the safety of others that they thought she may have told, and just completely tormented
Yeah, yeah.
Tormented her to the point where she ended up being sectioned. And
some people are wicked.
Not, and this is like a period of time later, still not the same. Still not the same. So that's why I asked you, and when I say danger to go into the abuser, I don't even mean physical danger, because as we can see from this young lady, there was no physical harm done to her.
Psychological.
Yeah, the psychological damage, the mental damage that has been done. It's one of those things where, will she ever be able to get back to some kind of normality, being the person she was?
Yeah. No, I get that. It's a really good question that you did ask. But yeah, there are some measures that, that we look at. And also as well, I actually...
Oh, hold on. You're gone again. There are some measures.
With other...
Froze. All I heard was there are some measures, and then you kind of froze after that.
Okay, cool. Now, so there are some measures that we do take. So one of the things that I do is I actually consult with other community leaders and other practitioners. Yes. So when like a big thing comes out, I don't just calculate it by myself, because I need counsel.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'll do is I'll get on the phone and I call people who don't work for me. So then they can just give me the straight.
Right. Hello? You're frozen again. Then they can give me the straight.
Right. So I'm calling someone. If I need to like fire somebody because of like a fireable thing, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, my
Hold on, you're
tell me that
the reception's going spotty again. It's just like,
cool.
I need to fire somebody.
Yeah. So is that better?
Yes.
Cool. So if I need to fire somebody, obviously, like, I'll consult with HR and stuff like that, but I'll usually call another person who doesn't work for me, who's HR, and I'll say, here's the situation, hypothetical, what do you think? So that's kind of something that I do to stay, on the safe side of things. Some things, if they're not a good idea, I've got a particular friend, like, he'll be like, yeah, bro, that's nah. He's like, nah, that's not a good idea, bro. And we don't...
one of those.
Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, he's just like, yeah, bro, that's not. It's not the one. It's not the one. And so yeah, it just has to get cancelled.
That's because that's something that I've often long thought about, like, because you have to have that process of being able to heal, and in healing, it's almost like if you've eaten something bad, you have to regurgitate it to feel better.
Yeah.
But you can't keep that in, because you're taking in poison. All that's going to do is just going to spread throughout the body and just cause damage, like literally down the line throughout life, because you could be passing that on to, taking that behavior into relationships and so on and so forth, and just manifesting itself in an ugly way. But there's also the thing where, what if you can't? If somebody's listening to this podcast and they're just like, yeah, because Uncle so-and-so, when he used to come round, or big cousin so-and-so, or my stepfather, my stepbrother, my dad's.
Yeah. Heard all of it.
And they're just like, I can't. How does a person, especially a boy, how does a boy, a man, start to even address that? Because like you said, one of the things that then come out of it is, all of a sudden, because they're abused, and it's so bizarre, it's because for men, it's almost like men or boys being abused automatically equals questionable masculinity.
Right.
Which is the most bizarre. But how do you then encourage or advise somebody who's just completely afraid to be able to open that door, but it's killing them?
So for me personally, what I do is I have to assess if I have the capacity to really be there for this person.
Okay.
Because if I don't have the capacity to really be there, I'm not going to open that can of worms.
Mm.
Because they're not going to know how to tidy it up.
Right. Yes, of course.
They're not going to know. So I have to be willing to handhold down that treacherous lane. So if I can decide that I can do that, then my whole thing is making sure that, number one, he feels heard, and that he understands that if he says something to me, I'm taking it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So feeling heard, and that's the first thing. Being open. Am I willing to be as open as I need to be in order to facilitate this healing? So I have to be, and I can't do it if I'm not open with myself. I can't do it if I haven't addressed these things. So obviously I have to revisit those places, which thank God are not painful to revisit anymore. They're not.
I was going to ask you that. How do you mentally manage and deal with having to go back to that place and that space?
The key is facilitation. It's not about embodying the situation as you're dealing with it or talking it through or whatever. It's about facilitating it. It just be a channel. Don't retain. It's not for you to retain. It gets difficult when you love the person that you're mentoring, because if they tell you that when I was 8 years old, XYZ happened, you're not sleeping for 2 days. And that's happened to me.
Wow.
Right? You can only facilitate so much because you love this person and you have an intimate relationship, like brothers or like a son. You know, like it's like close, like this.
Yes.
So that's when it gets difficult. But being able to make sure that they feel heard, making sure that you're open yourself as a person, which is what I do, and then allowing them that comfortability to express.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't have someone say to you, "Oh yeah, I went down on my cousin," and then you're like, "What? You did what?" You know, you can't. Because then they're just gonna shut up again, and before you know it, they've disappeared, and they will never talk about it again. They will never talk about it again. Like they'll rebury it.
Yeah, and just so that we're clear, because some people listening may not understand what that means. When you say I went down on my cousin, basically you're saying that a young boy came to you and said, I had oral sex with my cousin.
Yes.
Okay. So
yes.
It's and to your point, you do have to be careful how you respond, even the slightest flicker of a reaction in your face.
Yes.
You have to be so poker faced.
Yeah. And sometimes
it's spotty again. It's on sketch
things, and my heart also.
Hold on, say that again. It went very sketchy. You were saying, what did you just say?
Yeah. Oh God, what was I saying? Oh my days! It like literally just left me. Oh no, that's it. There are times when I'm being told things, and as I'm being told, my heart is breaking.
Wow.
And this is why, excuse me, developing fortitude is so important to me, because I need to allow myself to feel, but I also need my sense to stay with me so that I can decide clearly. And sometimes when I'm being told something, my heart is breaking, like smashing to pieces, and I have to like tell myself, this is not your moment. So allow this moment to be had by the person who it belongs to, and then you can cry later. Cry. If you want to cry, but cry later, because what they don't want to feel, they don't want to feel like they've now burdened you.
Right, of course, yes, and
that's an important thing to consider.
Yeah,
they don't want to feel like they've now burdened you with something. So,
and you have to, and it's again a conversation I was having yesterday. We were talking about grief and loss, and talking about how sometimes the person going through the loss, or the person, and I think this can be applied in this instance here, the person going through the traumatic experience, many times when they are retelling it, feel like they have to tell it in almost a bit of a blasé, flippant way.
Yeah.
It can stay strong for the hearer.
Yeah.
And that's the conversation we were having yesterday about people having gone through loss. So, for example, somebody that's just going through a loss, and then somebody comes to visit them, and the person comes to visit them is boohoo crying. So the person gone through the loss has to then console that person. No, it's the other way around. You're supposed to
let them process.
And it's the same thing that you're saying, though, isn't it? Really, that you can't give anything about you for that person talking to make them think, oh, okay, you know what? No, I don't want you to feel bad for me.
And the thing is, they've been harboring this thing forever already, and it's been weighing them down. So, it just takes a little bit of patience to allow them to have that moment. And there are times, there's times when these boys are telling me stuff. I'll be so real with you, man. That there's some times when these boys are telling me stuff, right? And a part of me is just like, oh my God, just get over 25 and you understand it's not a big deal. But in that moment, it's a very real feeling to him.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very real. I can think it's absurd. I can even shrug it off in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to be present in the moment and say, okay, he's 18 years old. He's going to feel like this. Some of the things that it just doesn't even matter. Some of these things, they don't matter. But in his brain, in that moment, at that time, his feelings are his feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say this to people when I'm always joking around. I'm like, oh my God, so much feelings. Like, I'm like, so many feelings. Because no, seriously, like they don't just cry. It's a privilege because they don't get to do this anywhere else. They don't just cry. I'm talking bogeys. Like I'm talking ugly cry. Like, you know what I mean? So they really get to flush out those things. But you can't do that. Everything. But you can't facilitate that if you genuinely don't have the time, if your heart is not in it, and and if you're trying to do it for a round of applause, then please don't touch it. Like, do not touch it. Leave it alone, because that's the work that goes unseen. And it's the work that when people are thanking God and their management and all this kind of stuff at podiums, this stuff doesn't get mentioned, because again, masculinity. Yeah, exactly.
And the only time it probably would get mentioned is if the award they're receiving is for this kind of work. So they can say, oh, you know what, I want to thank King Cas, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have been on this journey.
Right.
And that's why it's stories boys don't tell. And to be honest, and it's not just boys, there's a lot of women.
Yeah.
That, like, from my own experience, I mean, there's things not that I want to give away my age here, but I'm older. I think I'm probably about 10 years older than you. Okay, I'm 49. But, there's things I didn't talk about till last year.
Mm-hmm.
Last year. And it's so strange that, people don't stop to put a woman's femininity into question when she's the victim of abuse or anything like that. And it's like it's one of those things where the label and the stigma, which makes it almost easier, if I can use that word, for women to talk about and deal with, as opposed to boys.
Oh, I mean, I went to school with a young man. We'll call him Tim, right, out of respect. And Tim used to tell us all the time when we were in secondary school. He was like, "Yeah, I lost my virginity at 6. He's from Jamaica." And and he would boast about it. "Yeah, I lost my virginity at 6. Cool, all right." And obviously the boys looked at this and they're like, "Wow, this is amazing," right? By the time we finished school, Tim had 2 kids. By the time we left school, by the time we were 18, Tim was in jail, and he had 5 kids by 4 baby mums.
At the age of 18.
At the age of 18. 5 children. 4 different.
By the age of 18.
By the age of 18. But here's the thing, though. We look back on this. I look back on this right? And I was wondering, right, like, I wonder how Tim is doing, just randomly. And because I was able to unpack my stuff, I was like, oh, Tim was raped.
Exactly, because at 6 years old.
Yeah.
6.
It's when I grew up and I was like, oh my days, he was actually abused. Like, that's what that was. But the thing is, it's a badge of honor in that culture.
But you see,
Him pretty. Look upon him pretty. Look at him. Him will get all the girls, and all this kind of stuff, and they big it up. And then, but the youth was getting abused.
Because at 6, and that's one of the things I wanted to say to you. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I completely forgot. When you look at it, and for some boys, their masculinity is in question when they're abused, and then others to what's that? What's that expression they used to use in Jamaica? I don't even know if they still use it. They turn into a bedroom bully, and they just their way through life, just like just having sex with any woman that will look at them throughout life. And it just makes me wonder that men that are like that, could it be that the reason that they are now having this thing where they have to sleep with anyone that will look at them is because they're trying to assert their masculinity, because something could have happened to them to put it in question years earlier?
Perhaps. I mean, you know, it's not always the reason, but that's a big one. That's a really, really big reason. And usually, you know, anyone's behavior is a receipt of their childhood, if you really think about it, you know. So for me, it's like that's one of many reasons, you know, why men can develop into that. And some people, they completely go the opposite way. They close up. They don't have any kind of sexual contact with people. They don't. They just completely lock up. And I know both males and females who are like that, who've, you know, been abused in the past and then just shut up shop completely. There's a boy that I know who is nearly 20. He's never kissed a girl because he was so badly traumatized by what happened to him when he was about 11 years old, you know. And so it goes either way. Some people, they get really hypersexual and they can't put it away, and then some people, it's locked away, like you couldn't even pay them to bring it out.
Wow, that's it's heartbreaking, Cas. It's heartbreaking that, and especially because, you know, your work is in the Black community with the young Black boys. It's something that you and I spoke on last week when we were having the conversations. It's amazing that in the African countries and the Caribbean islands, how homophobic they are. And in Jamaica, and I don't know about any of the other islands, and I don't know if the laws changed now. Once upon a time, to be a homosexual in Jamaica was illegal. Homosexuality in Jamaica was illegal.
Yeah.
So, but to know that these communities are so homophobic, but yet to hear how many Black boys have been sexually abused by family members, or
who are men.
Who are men. Yes, let's put that out. Who are men, raped by family members or family friends that are men, inappropriately touched by family members or friends of the family who are men, or or were forced to perform sex acts with family members or friends of the family that were men, all within the Black community. So it just makes me wonder, it's like, for a community that has perpetuated homophobia so strongly, because like you saying, there's, you know, what are some of those songs like, because I remember, there's a reggae artist that couldn't perform in the UK because of his homophobic lyrics. There's all these other homophobic songs, but yet child abuse towards boys in the African countries and the Caribbean islands is, like you said, rife.
Yeah. And the people abusing, they don't think that the person's ever going to speak because that's their masculinity again on the line.
Yeah, also.
Right. So that's something that through the work that I do, like, we try and counteract that, because I know what that person feels like.
And
it is.
And it's funny because now that you say that, because it's not just the abused masculinities in question. It's the abuser's masculinity in question. And sometimes this abuser is a husband and a father.
Yes. Yes. I have a young man who for years he was abused by his father sexually for years. And when I asked him, it was one of the times when I had to really ask myself, is this the time to ask? Is this the right thing to ask? What should I do? And I prayed about it, because in those moments, it's not my wisdom that I can go by.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter how many times I've heard these stories. I can't just use my own wisdom. It's not enough, and I have to pray. And this boy, I remember, like I avoided asking him. When I first met him, I caught a vibe, and I knew. I was like, I know what happens. You know, he was so smiley and so warm and so gentle, but it was a little bit too much. And I was like, this is not nature. This is a mask. You know, but I was like, mind your business, and I kept it moving. I did, because yeah, it's a very intrusive subject. And then one day, you know, I just saw him on social media, and I just checked in, how are you doing? And I knew that things weren't great at home with mom, so I just thought, you know, how are you getting on with mom? Oh yeah, I moved out. I was living with so and so, and the so and so that he was living with was somebody who I personally I knew that this person. I knew that this person had already, I need a good word for this. This person had already transgressed.
So hold on. You know what? That's nice and biblical of you to use that word transgressed, right? Forgive us our transgressions. However, let's call a spade a spade. The person that this young boy went to live with
is a predator.
That's where I was going. Is a predator. Let's call a spade
is a predator.
Let's not be pretty. Let's call a spade a spade.
Is a predator. So as soon as he told me that he went to go and live there, I picked up my phone, because I know something she had done previously. I picked up my phone and I said, what happened? So he explains to me, you know, and the moment he told me that he had gone to stay there, I knew that this woman, she has the same eye as me. She just doesn't do with it the same thing. She doesn't do the same thing with the eye. So if I can see that someone's vulnerable, yeah.
You use your, let's call it intuition. Whereas you use what you pick up on and your intuition to help heal these boys, she will see that and she will take it and she will use it to abuse these boys, knowing that they're vulnerable.
Right. So as soon as I found out that he had gone to stay there, I called him and he told me all about it. He was like, yeah, she turned out to be a bit of a control freak, a bit bossy. This woman.
You picked up the phone, because it was going spotty.
Yeah, so I picked up the phone and we were catching up, and I just wanted to know what was going on, because I was concerned that he had gone to stay at this woman's house. And when he told me, because this woman is a predator, so I was like this is not positive. But then, because I knew that for him to go and stay there, she must have seen what I saw, and I know what she would do with it. So my response immediately was, I had to ask him. I said, look, I really, really don't want to ask you this, and I hate that I have to ask you this, but I feel something in my spirit, and I have to say to you. I said, when you were growing up, did anybody ever touch you inappropriately? And he said, yes. I said, who was it? He goes, it was two of the closest people to me. I said, who's that? He goes, it was my dad and my brother. So that was another moment where my heart broke, but I can't be showing that, because right now this is his moment, and I'm facilitating. And it's the middle of the night when we're having this conversation, so it doesn't help. I didn't sleep that night.
Wow.
I didn't sleep that night, because I'm just like, another one. And this is after the book is done, you know. This is after I've been writing my book, you know. So I've already got all these stories, and then they still keep coming in. I was in rehearsals a few weeks ago for the play that you know, which is adapted from the book. And after we saw a particular scene being acted out, one of the guys who was present in the rehearsals, he revealed to me. He goes, "Oh, what happened to that boy in the play? It also happened to me." And so that was another 2-hour conversation where we had to sit down, and I had to facilitate. And that's another night that I didn't sleep.
So what happened to this young man that went to stay at this predators home?
Well, the thing is, he eventually, because she was a bit of a control freak, according to him, and she also lied on me to him as well. I didn't follow it up because it's stupid. Like, I know the truth, but she was a bit of a control freak. So he moved out. He found a place to go. He was going to stay with an aunt, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just glad that he was not at her house.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah.
But he saw some things, and after he told me his whole experience, and I said to him, the reason why I've called you to ask you this is because, number one, I had a moment last year when we met, and I just sensed that something was off, but I just didn't want to be intrusive, so I left it be.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, obviously, I was checking in on you this time around because I know that things weren't really great at home, and I wanted to find out how you're doing. The moment you told me where you went, I had to call you because I was concerned. And I was concerned because a few months ago, XYZ, and this woman was involved. So actually, I have excommunicated her because of this. Because I can't have those type of people associated with the work that I do. Like, I work with young people. Like, no.
Yeah, and especially somebody that's a predator. And one thing I just actually really want to make very, very clear, because a lot of people look at the predator as being a man.
Yes.
But let's not get it twisted here. There are some women who can, the same way that they always look at it and say, men can see when a young girl is vulnerable, or they can see when she's naive or something like, or inexperienced. It's the same way. You've got some women that do that to other girls, young girls, and they do it to boys.
Yeah.
So, and that's one thing for people to really, really be vigilant of. It's not just men abusing boys or men abusing girls. It's also, there are women out there that are doing this.
And they do it because some of them do it knowing that no one's going to look at them twice. And some of them do it, they do it knowing that some of these boys who are uneducated, it's a badge of honor.
Yeah, because as far as they're concerned, I lost my virginity to an older woman.
Right. So it's
no, you did, but in order for that to happen, that woman, right, as long as you were under 16, you could have been saying yes all day and all night as much as you want. You're under 16. That woman abused you. Mm-hmm. You didn't, take that badge of honor off that you lost your virginity at 14 and 13 or whatever to this older woman. No, that woman was inappropriate with you. What she did could land her in jail.
Yeah. These are the conversations that I'm trying to be having because I've seen things, and like I said, I was the non-starter. There was a time when it's like, oh, he's coming, because I'm gonna bring it up. I'm going to bring it up. I'm really going to bring it up. Yeah, and we're gonna discuss it. And if you cut me off today, and if you want to snub me, believe me, round 2 is coming. We will have this discussion. And one time somebody asked me, oh, why do you ask some of these really awkward questions? And I said, because it's all to do with identity. I said, do you think I want to be 50 and be questioning who I am? Are you crazy? I've seen it happen. It's a sad sight.
Well,
so I'm going to be.
You know what, to your point, what just came to me is I don't want to be 50 and questioning my identity. But you know what just came to me with that? Remember when a few years ago, the DL brother was a big thing? Isn't that exactly what that is?
Yeah.
You've gotten married to this woman, you've had these children, but yet you're speaking out there, sleeping with men. Isn't that literally men questioning their identity?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to ask questions. If I spot certain behaviors in myself, I've learned not to blame myself. I've learned to be like, okay, let's study the history. Where might some of this stuff come from? Right? So if I'm able to actually look back in my history, look at my family, and understand the character traits of certain people, I can make sense of things. Right. But if you sugarcoat it, right, and decorate the dead, as I like to say, right?
I'm going to use that, decorate the dead.
Right. lies, 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 lies. There I am thinking I'm the grandchild of this like exceptional human being, but then like all this stuff is missing. So for me, that's what, if you have access to your families, if you have access to people who know, you know, those who came before you, speak with them. It's a huge part of dealing with trauma, because there's,
sorry,
because then you can actually put a place to a name and a name to a place. You can understand why you behave in certain ways. You can understand, okay, cool, so this is a pattern, you know. And for some people, it's a difficult discussion. They don't want to have it. You know, I have another saying, lumpy rugs. Some people got some lumpy rugs.
Hello, because listen, I was going to say that to you when we first started speaking, when you were saying that you're going to blow it wide open so you can see it from space. Because and I said, or otherwise known as sweeping it under the rug, sweeping it under the carpet. And my thing is this, and I remember I gave a presentation last year, and one of the graphics I put up was somebody sweeping. It's like you got a rug and it's like a sweeping, but what they were sweeping was lies, shame, guilt. Those words were what were being swept under the carpet, and you just saw this big mound on. I was just like, all you do when you're sweeping things under the carpet is you're just creating a lump under the carpet that eventually somebody's going to trip over that lump and everything's going to come pouring out. So is it not better that it is unpacked?
Yes.
In a delicate way.
Yes.
Rather than it just comes spewing out like a volcano one day because somebody literally has just erupted.
Yeah. I'll tell you this. So another situation, there was a young man who was, he was really upset one day, and I said to him, let's go for a walk. And he's like, I'd rather not. And I was like, and I'd rather you came for the walk. Because he knew, like, it's like you're pissed, and I can see it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like when he's upset, all these feelings. You know what I mean? Like it's like a wartime siren. You know what I mean? Like when he's upset.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Someone, let's go for a walk. Right? I wanted to go to Tesco's and buy some food for dinner, and I was gonna make a delicious meal, but blah. So I said, let's go. So we're standing outside Tesco's and we're lining up, and he is just foul. Like his whole mood, his vibe, it was foul.
Funky.
Ridiculous. It was horrible, right?
Wow.
So and these are the moments when I have to be like, okay, let's do the love thing, And so so I'm like, okay, like, so what is it? And he didn't understand why he was upset or whatever. And we kind of basically retraced his emotional steps. Mm-hmm. And very, very quickly we were able to go back to when he was 10. And there was a family decision that was made, and it affected him hugely. And he wasn't consulted about it, and he was still angry about it, and didn't realize he's still angry about that decision, and he feels bad again, not wanting to bring unrest. Kept it quiet, right? So he's angry that this thing happened. It affected his life. He didn't have a say in it. Now he's an adult, and he feels like it's affected him because he's having to kind of start on the back foot, right? So this thing that happened between his parents, even, right? It trickled down and has affected him a whole decade later, right? Or just under a decade later. We just talked about it while we're lining up to go inside Tesco's, and that's as a result of like noticing that, okay, he's upset, and if he's this upset, it's not gonna be something trivial. So my whole thing is like, let's get down to the nitty gritty ASAP. Let's get down there. It's gonna hurt, so we might as well be quick. Go.
Rip that band-aid off. There's no peeling. Just rip it off.
Exactly.
Wow. And that's why the work that you do is so important, and I find that I've been using this expression so much recently. It's a quote I learned from Frederick Douglass. Mm-hmm. And it says, it's easier to raise healthy boys than to repair broken men.
Absolutely.
And I've been, I've used that in so many of these podcasts that I've done, hearing about, and it's, one of the podcasts I didn't know I had to use it was somebody talking about women not having that father-daughter conversation and how things turn out in relationships. Used it again, talking to a therapist that deals with the effects of divorce on children and how the parents come together and co-parent. Oh, you have to hear that one. How they have to come together and co-parent, and if they realizing the damage done to children if they, in some of the actions, that when they're divorcing and getting at each other, they don't realize the damage that's being caused to the children. And now speaking to you, it's easier, and I wish people would get this. It's easier to raise healthy children than to repair broken adults.
Agreed.
And it's just like, you know, I just want to say, leave people's children alone. Leave the children alone, for goodness sake, leave them alone. And especially in some of these cases where, you know, that expression, the abuser, the abused turns into the abuser.
Yeah.
And it's just that cycle so I'm so grateful that you're doing the work that you're doing with these young men, so that, God willing, they don't turn into abusers because they were themselves abused. They could move forward, living, leading healthy, productive lives.
Without shame.
Without shame. Thank you, Cas. So tell us again your book. So you said you've written 2 books, one's published. So tell us what I want to know is, tell us your books, where can anybody find you, and what's next for you?
Sure. Okay, so the first book. Yeah, sure. So the first book is called Ambition Is Not Enough. I wrote that book in 2013 and it was published in 2014. That's available on Amazon. Ambition Is Not Enough. And that was me, you know, trying a hand at literary writing. It was a God message, which was alarming to me because I deliberately failed my GCSEs. I did not like score. I was not keen on writing. For someone who's an amazing writer, I didn't love it enough. I just didn't care about it. So that was me walking into my own writing truth. It's like a self-help. That was that. And then my second book is called Stories Boys Don't Like to Tell, and that is coined to be out in November of 2020. Battery's low. Just so you know, battery's like 5%. So I've got that book's coming out in November, and it's all about revealing stories that boys literally don't like to tell.
And anything from like you say, being rejected by your high school crush, all the way through to being sexually abused.
Agreed.
Those kinds of stories. Okay, so those are your books, and where can anybody find you? And I know it's not every case you're going to be able to take on. I know that. So because just in case you're got a deluge of requests coming in, but so people follow you on social media just so that they can know where to get your books and because you said the Stories Boys Don't Like to Tell is being turned into a play.
Yes, it is. Yes, so you can find me on social media. Ajani Kingdom, that's spelled AJANI Kingdom, and that's on all social media platforms.
Okay, and your play, obviously now that Rona's decided to lock everybody in. So
yeah, it's going to be next year. But that's going to be exciting. It's a beautiful play. It's powerful. I can't wait to see it.
I'm going to come over and watch it. Definitely.
I look forward to that.
King Cas, it has been an absolute pleasure and an honor. Thank you for sharing with me. Thank you for just revealing your truth, and thank you for the work that you are doing. I really
No problem at all. My pleasure to be with you. Thank you for having me.
All righty. Thank you so much, my love. Blessings.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.